My son and his wife invited me to spend my golden years with them in their $10 million Beverly Hills mansion. But when I arrived with my suitcase in hand, no one was home. Just as I reached for the doorbell, their neighbor ran up to me, grabbed my arm, and started shouting, "Run away before it is too late. These are terrible people." I replied, confused and defensive, asking what did they do. He revealed the shocking truth to me. "You are the third father they have brought here this year. Run before you become a prisoner." Before I continue this story, please like and subscribe if you have ever had to trust your gut over your heart. Let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. I stood on the sidewalk of what was supposed to be the rest of my life. The California sun was beating down on my neck, and the shirt sticking to my back felt like a second skin of anxiety. I checked the address on my phone for the 10th time. 1420 Sierra Alta Way. This was it. The iron gates were formidable, painted a matte black that absorbed the light, and beyond them sat a structure that looked less like a home and more like a modern art museum. It was all glass and sharp angles, a white fortress perched on the edge of a canyon. My son Jason had sent me photos, of course. He had bragged about the square footage, the infinity pool, and the home theater. He told me his tech startup had finally exploded, that he was the king of Los Angeles, and that it was time for me, his widowed father, to stop freezing in Ohio and live like royalty. I dragged my 2 heavy suitcases up the inclined driveway. My wheels clicked rhythmically against the expensive pavement. I was 71 years old, and while I kept myself fit, the heat was already making me dizzy. I reached the massive front door, which was made of some heavy dark wood that probably cost more than my first car. I pressed the ring doorbell. I waited. Silence. I pressed it again. Nothing. I pulled my phone out to call Jason. It went straight to voicemail. I called Megan, my daughter-in-law. Voicemail. A knot of worry began to tighten in my stomach. Jason had insisted I sell my house in Ohio immediately. He said the market was crashing and I needed to liquidate now to secure my retirement. I had the cashier's check for $500,000 tucked into the inside pocket of my jacket. It was everything I had. It was 40 years of mortgage payments and saving pennies. And now, standing in front of this silent mansion, that check felt incredibly heavy against my chest. I stepped closer to the door, shielding my eyes to peer through the side glass panel. That is when I saw it. It was not a welcome mat or a note for the delivery driver. It was a piece of paper taped aggressively to the wood at eye level. It had been ripped as if someone had tried to tear it down in a hurry, but missed a piece. The edges were jagged, but the bright red stamp was still visible. Final notice to vacate. Sheriff's Department. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. This was not a notice for a missed package. This was a legal threat. I leaned in closer, my old eyes squinting to read the fine print. Unauthorized occupants. Immediate surrender of premises. My mind, trained for decades as a forensic accountant, instantly began to process the data points. A $10 million house. A son who claims to be a tech mogul. A ripped eviction notice on the front door. The math was not adding up. I felt a cold sweat that had nothing to do with the California sun. Suddenly, a rustling sound from the hedges to my left made me jump. I turned around expecting a gardener, or maybe a stray dog. Instead, a man burst out from the bushes separating the properties. He looked to be about my age, maybe older, with wild white hair and a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite. He was wearing a faded military t-shirt and holding a garden hose like a weapon. He did not say hello. He did not ask if I was lost. He marched right up to me, invading my personal space, his eyes wide and frantic. "Get away from that door," he barked. His voice was gravel and smoke. I took a step back, gripping the handle of my suitcase. "Excuse me," I said, trying to maintain my composure. "I am visiting my son. He lives here." The man let out a harsh, barking laugh. He pointed a calloused finger at the white mansion. Nobody lives there, he shouted. They occupy it. They infect it. And you are the mark. I blinked, confused. I am Harold Bennett. My son is Jason Bennett. He owns this property. I think you are mistaken. The neighbor shook his head violently. I am not mistaken, Harold. I am Gus. I have lived next door for 30 years. I watched the real owners move out 2 years ago to travel Europe. And I watched your son and that plastic wife of his break the lock on the back gate 6 months ago. I felt indignant. My son was a businessman. He was successful. I started to argue, but Gus cut me off. Listen to me, you old fool. They are squatters, professional squatters. They find empty mansions listed for rent, break in, change the locks, and create fake lease agreements. In California, it takes months, sometimes years, to get them out. They live like kings for free until the sheriff comes, and then they move to the next one. But that takes money for lawyers and fake appearances. That is where you come in. I stared at him. The word squatter bounced around my skull. It was impossible. Jason sent me photos of gala dinners. Megan was an influencer with thousands of followers. They posted pictures of champagne and caviar. Gus stepped closer, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial hiss. You are not the first. You are the third. I stared at him blankly. The third? What, the third, father? Gus said, his eyes burning with intensity. 3 months ago, it was Megan's father, a nice man from Arizona. He stayed for 2 weeks. I heard them screaming at night. He left in a cab crying. A month ago, it was some uncle of Jason's. He lasted 4 days. And now you. They bring you in, they bleed you dry, and they toss you out before the eviction date. Look at the door, Harold. Look at the notice. They are desperate. They need cash to bribe the lawyers or pay off their debts before they get thrown on the street. My hand instinctively went to my chest pocket again. The check, $500,000. Was that why Jason was so insistent I sell the house this month? Was that why he demanded I bring a cashier's check instead of a wire transfer, claiming it was better for tax purposes? The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, creating a picture I did not want to see. But I was a father. Denial is a powerful drug. You are lying, I said, though my voice lacked conviction. Jason is a good boy. He has a degree. Gus grabbed my arm. His grip was surprisingly strong. He looked at me with pity, and that hurt more than his anger. Run, he whispered. Run before they come back. If you go through that door, you are not a guest. You are a prisoner. I am a veteran, Harold. I know a trap when I see one. This is a kill zone. Get your bags, walk down the hill to the Sunset Strip, and call a taxi. Go to a hotel. Do not let them get you inside. Just as the words left his mouth, I heard the roar of an engine. A sleek silver Porsche convertible tore around the corner and screeched up the driveway. The music was blasting a heavy bass that rattled my teeth. My heart sank. It was them. Jason was behind the wheel wearing sunglasses that cost more than my suits. Megan was in the passenger seat, tapping furiously on her phone. They didn't look like criminals. They looked like the golden couple of Instagram. But now, through the lens of Gus's warning and that ripped notice on the door, the image distorted. The car was dusty. There was a small dent on the bumper that hadn't been fixed. It was a rental, or maybe a lease they hadn't paid. The car stopped inches from where I stood. The music cut off abruptly. Jason jumped out. He didn't smile. He didn't open his arms to hug me. His face was flushed, his jaw tight. He looked at Gus, then at me, and his expression twisted into pure rage. "Get away from him!" Jason screamed at Gus. "I told you I would call the police if you harassed my guests again. Get off my property!" Gus didn't flinch. "It is not your property, Jason. And the sheriff is coming on Friday. You are running out of time." Jason's face turned a violent shade of red. He rushed toward us, placing himself physically between me and the neighbor. He grabbed my shoulders, but not in an embrace. He was steering me, pushing me toward the front door. "Dad, get inside. Don't listen to this senile lunatic. He has dementia. He thinks everyone is a spy. Get inside now." I looked at Jason. I looked at the panic in his eyes. It wasn't concern for my safety. It was the panic of a man whose lifeline was talking to the enemy. Megan was out of the car now, unlocking the front door with a key that seemed to stick, requiring a violent jiggle to work. "Hurry up, Harold," she snapped. Her voice was shrill. "We have neighbors who watch everything. We don't want a scene." Gus shouted one last time from the driveway. "Check the property records, Harold. Public domain. Check the records." Jason slammed the heavy wood door shut, sealing us inside. The silence of the house was instant and oppressive. The air inside was stale, hot, and heavy, as if the air conditioning hadn't been run in weeks. I stood in the grand foyer clutching my suitcase handle. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I looked at my son. He was breathing hard, wiping sweat from his forehead. He turned to me and the mask slipped back into place. A smile that didn't reach his eyes plastered onto his face. "Welcome home, Dad," Jason said. "Sorry about that. The neighborhood is full of crazy people. You know how it is in LA. Rich people lose their minds." Megan was already walking away, her heels clicking loudly on the marble floor. Her voice echoed back to us. "I am going to check the room. Make sure he doesn't touch anything in the living room, Jason. We have the photo shoot tomorrow." I looked around. The foyer was grand, yes, with a chandelier that sparkled in the dim light. But as my eyes adjusted, I saw the truth. There was no furniture. The massive living room to my right was completely empty. No sofas, no rugs, no art on the walls. Just empty, dusty floorboards. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light cutting through the blinds. It didn't look lived in. It looked abandoned. "Where is the furniture, Jason?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "You sent me photos of a living room with white leather sofas." Jason waved his hand dismissively. "Oh, that. We are redecorating. Minimalist chic. It is the trend right now, Dad. We cleared everything out to get the feng shui right. Megan is a visionary with design." He put an arm around my shoulder. It felt heavy, restrictive. He was guiding me, not leading me. He was pushing me toward a door under the main staircase. "Come on, let's get you settled. You must be exhausted. And hey, did you bring the check? The bank closes in an hour, and I want to make sure we deposit it so you can start earning interest immediately." I stiffened. We hadn't even had a glass of water. I hadn't even taken my shoes off. And he was asking for the money. The neighbor's words rang in my ears. "Run." But I couldn't run. I was 71, tired, and standing in the middle of a fortress with my only son. I had to be smart. I tapped my jacket pocket. "It is safe, Jason. But I am too tired to go to the bank. Let me rest first." Jason's grip on my shoulder tightened. Just for a fraction of a second, it became painful. Then he released me. "Sure, Dad. Rest. We can't handle business at dinner. But first, give me your phone." I blinked. "My phone." "Why digital detox?" Jason said smoothly. He held out his hand, palm up. Expectation clear. "Megan has a rule. No devices for the first 24 hours. We want to connect as a family. No distractions. Plus, I need to update your security software. That crazy neighbor might have hacked your Bluetooth. Give it to me." It was a test. I knew it. If I refused, the veneer of politeness would crack. If I gave it to him, I was cutting my line to the outside world. I looked at his eyes. They were cold, calculating. The eyes of a stranger. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my smartphone. I placed it in his hand. "Great," Jason said, slipping it into his own pocket instantly. Now let me show you your room." He led me past the sweeping staircase that led to the upper bedrooms with the balconies and the views. He didn't take me up there. He opened a narrow door underneath the stairs. A flight of wooden steps led down into the dark. "The guest suite is downstairs," Jason said. "It is cooler down there. Very private." I looked down into the gloom. The smell of mildew wafted up. This was not the guest suite. This was the basement. But I nodded. I gripped my suitcase, and I descended into the dark, knowing that the trap had snapped shut behind me. I was alone. I was isolated. But as my hand brushed against the secret zipper in the lining of my suitcase where I kept my second-burner flip phone, I knew the game was far from over. Jason thought he had caught a senile old fly. He didn't realize he had just trapped a hornet. I walked down the creaking stairs, counting each step. 14. At the bottom, Jason flicked a switch. A single naked bulb illuminated a concrete room. There was a mattress on the floor. No frame. Just a mattress with a gray sheet. A small stained rug lay beside it. There were no windows. This was the luxurious retirement I had sold my home for. "It is temporary," Jason said quickly, seeing my expression. "The furniture for the guest room is on back order. Supply chain issues. You know how it is. But the mattress is memory foam. Top of the line." He didn't wait for my response. He backed up the stairs. "Dinner is at 7. Don't come up before then. Megan needs to focus on her content creation, and she can't have noise. Rest up, Dad." The door at the top of the stairs clicked shut. I heard the distinct sound of a deadbolt sliding into place. Locked. He had locked me in the basement. I stood in the center of the damp room. I didn't panic. Panic is for amateurs. I was a forensic accountant. I spent my life finding the lies buried in mountains of numbers. I spent my career catching people who thought they were smarter than the system. I sat on the edge of the mattress. It smelled of old sweat. I took a deep breath. My son was a predator. My daughter-in-law was a parasite. They wanted my money. They wanted to erase me. I reached into the hidden lining of my suitcase and pulled out the cheap prepaid phone I had bought at the airport, on a whim, a habit from my old days of auditing dangerous firms. I checked the signal. 1 bar. It was enough. I wasn't going to just survive this. I was going to audit them. I was going to document every lie, every theft, every threat. And when I was done, I wasn't just going to leave. I was going to bring the whole house of cards down on top of their heads. I looked at the check in my pocket. $500,000. It was a lot of money, enough to make people do terrible things. But what Jason didn't know, what he hadn't bothered to ask in his rush to lock me away, was that I hadn't sold my house in Ohio for $500,000. I had sold it for $2 million. The check in my pocket was just the decoy. The real money was sitting in a trust he couldn't touch. I smiled in the darkness. The basement was cold, but my rage was keeping me warm. Let the games begin, son. Let's see who really owns this house. I sat on the edge of the mattress in the dark for what felt like hours. The air down there was thick with moisture. It tasted like wet concrete and neglect. This was not a guest room. It was a holding cell. I ran my hand along the wall. It was cold and damp to the touch. My son had put his 71-year-old father in a dungeon while he played king of the castle upstairs. I could hear footsteps creaking on the floorboards above my head, pacing, back and forth, like a caged animal. When the door at the top of the stairs finally clicked open, harsh artificial light flooded down, blinding me for a moment. Jason's silhouette appeared framed by the doorway. "Come on up, Dad. Dinner is ready. We are celebrating your arrival." I climbed the stairs slowly, my knees popping with every step. I wanted him to see my age. I wanted him to see the frailty he was exploiting. When I emerged into the hallway, the contrast was jarring. The house was massive, with vaulted ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the glittering lights of Los Angeles. But it was hollow. It was a shell. There were no paintings on the walls, just rectangular outlines where art used to hang. There were no rugs to dampen the sound of our footsteps. It echoed like a tomb. We walked into the main living area. I expected a dining table, chairs, maybe a home-cooked meal to welcome me after a cross-country flight. Instead, we sat on the floor. A single cardboard pizza box sat open in the center of the vast, empty room, the grease staining the expensive marble tile. It was pepperoni stone cold. The cheese had that rubbery, translucent look of something that had been sitting out for hours. This was the celebration. Megan was sitting cross-legged a few feet away, bathed in the white glow of a ring light she had set up in the corner. She was wearing a tracksuit that probably cost more than my first house, yet we were eating like college students during finals week. She didn't look at me. She was typing furiously on her phone, her thumbs a blur. I lowered myself to the hard floor with a grunt of pain that wasn't entirely faked. "Where's the furniture?" "Jason," I asked, gesturing to the cavernous space. "You sent me photos of a white leather sectional and a glass dining table." Jason didn't look at me. He grabbed a slice of cold pizza and tore into it aggressively. "Oh, that. We got rid of it. We are pivoting to extreme minimalism. It is the new wave in Silicon Valley. Less distraction, more focus. Megan says material possessions block the flow of creative energy." Megan didn't look up from her phone, but she spoke, her voice sharp and dismissive. "It is called aesthetic fasting, Harold. You wouldn't understand. It is very high level. We are cleansing the space before the new custom pieces arrive from Italy. They are stuck in customs. Supply chain nightmare." I looked at the corner of the room. There was a pile of unopened mail. Final notices. Utility bills. I looked at the pizza box. It was from a discount chain, the kind that sells large pies for $5. My forensic accountant brain began to tally the ledger. Expensive clothes. Rental Porsche outside. $10 million house. But they couldn't afford a $20 dinner or a chair for their father. This wasn't minimalism. This was insolvency. Jason wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. He didn't use a napkin. There were no napkins. He leaned in close, invading my personal space. The smell of stale alcohol and desperation on his breath was overpowering. "Listen, Dad. We need to talk business. I know you are tired, but the markets don't sleep." I took a small bite of the pizza. It tasted like cardboard and salt. "What kind of business, Jason?" He cracked his knuckles. He was vibrating with nervous energy. "My tech startup, the one I told you about. We are on the verge of a unicorn valuation. Billions, Dad. But right now we are in a bit of a liquidity crunch. It is just a cash flow issue. The investors are dragging their feet on the wire transfer because of the banking holidays in Switzerland." He was using buzzwords he had heard in movies. He didn't know that I spent 40 years auditing Fortune 500 companies. I knew a liquidity crunch when I saw one. This wasn't a crunch. It was a vacuum. He continued, his eyes darting around the room as if the walls were listening. "That check you have, the $500,000, it is unsafe to keep it in your pocket. Identity theft is rampant in this city. You need to sign it over to me tonight. I can deposit it in my corporate account. It will be safe there. Plus, I can use it as proof of reserves to unlock the investor capital. I will give it back next week with interest. Double interest." I looked at him. My son. The boy I taught to ride a bike. He was lying to my face with the ease of a sociopath. He didn't have a corporate account. He probably didn't even have a checking account that wasn't overdrawn. He wanted my life savings to plug a hole that was already sinking his ship. I pretended to struggle with the pizza crust, my hands shaking slightly. I dropped the slice. I looked confused. "Jason, I don't know. That money is for my care. If I give it to you, what if the bank holds it? I need to buy my medicines. Megan finally looked up from her phone. Her eyes were cold, dead sharks in a sea of makeup. Just give him the check, Harold. Don't be selfish. We opened our home to you. We are letting you live in a mansion in Beverly Hills. The least you can do is help your son close a deal. Do you want him to fail? Do you want us to lose this house because you were too stingy to help the guilt trip, the weaponization of family duty? It was clumsy but effective. If I were truly the senile old man they thought I was, I would have handed it over just to stop the hostility. But I wasn't. I tapped my chest pocket. I understand, I said slowly, my voice quavering. I want to help. But the check, it is not endorsed yet. And my bank back in Ohio, they have strict rules. If I deposit it into a third-party account without verification, they will freeze the funds for 30 days. Fraud protection. You know how it is. Jason stiffened. 30 days. We don't have 30 days. We don't have 30 hours. I shrugged helplessly. It is the bank, son. I can't change the policy. But if we go to the branch here in Los Angeles on Monday, I can open a new account in my name, deposit it, and then wire you the money. That is the only way to make it instant. Jason slammed his fist onto the marble floor. Damn it! Monday is too late. The deadline is Friday. He stood up and paced the empty room, running his hands through his hair. He looked like he was about to scream. Megan stood up too, smoothing her tracksuit. She glared at me with pure venom. You are useless, Harold. You are complicating everything. We offer you paradise and you give us red tape. She stormed out of the room, her footsteps echoing up the stairs. Jason looked down at me. The mask of the loving son was gone completely now. He looked at me with disgust. Fine. Monday. But you are staying in the basement until then. I don't want you wandering around messing up the aesthetic. And don't think about leaving. The alarm system is armed. If you open a door, the police come. And in this neighborhood, they shoot intruders. He turned and walked away, leaving me alone on the floor with the cold pizza. He didn't offer to help me up. He didn't say goodnight. He just turned off the lights in the living room, plunging me into darkness. I sat there for a moment, letting my eyes adjust to the shadows. He thought he had trapped me. He thought he had intimidated me. But as I sat in the dark, listening to the silence of the empty house, I wasn't afraid. I was calculating. I had bought myself 3 days, and in 3 days I could burn their whole world down. I woke up to the sound of heavy footsteps pounding above my head. The basement ceiling was thin, uninsulated, and every movement from the main floor translated into a dull thud that vibrated through the damp mattress. My back ached. My joints felt like rusted hinges. I had spent the night in my clothes, shivering under the thin gray sheet, listening to the house settle. It was a $10 million house, yet down here it felt like a prison cell. I checked my burner phone. It was hidden deep inside my sock. The battery was holding steady. I had a few messages from my lawyer back in Ohio confirming the trust fund was secure, but I didn't reply yet. I couldn't risk the signal being intercepted if Jason was monitoring the network traffic. I climbed the stairs, slowly adopting the posture of a defeated man. I needed them to see a frail, confused senior citizen, not the man who had uncovered embezzlement schemes at major corporations. When I opened the door to the kitchen, the sunlight was blinding. The space was magnificent, designed for a chef with acres of marble countertops and appliances that cost more than a luxury sedan. But the atmosphere was toxic. Jason was leaning against the island, drinking an energy drink. He looked like he hadn't slept. His eyes were bloodshot, and he was tapping his foot nervously. Megan was nowhere to be seen, but I could hear her voice from the next room, talking fast and loud into her phone, likely recording a video. "Morning, Dad." Jason said, his voice tight. "We need to go to the bank, now." I rubbed my eyes, feigning a groggy confusion. Jason, it is 7 in the morning. The banks do not open until 9. And I told you my account has a 24-hour hold on large transfers when I am out of state. It is a security feature I set up years ago after that identity theft scare. Remember, I watched him process the lie. I had never actually set up such a feature, but Jason didn't know banking regulations. He only knew desperation. He slammed the empty can onto the counter. "Call them," he demanded. "Tell them to lift it." "I can try," I said, my voice trembling just the right amount. "But if I push them too hard, they might flag the transaction as suspicious activity. You know how the Patriot Act is. If they freeze the account for an investigation, we won't see that money for weeks." "Do you want to risk that?" The color drained from his face. Weeks. He couldn't wait weeks. He couldn't wait days. He ran a hand through his hair, pulling at the roots. "Fine. Fine. Don't call. We wait until tomorrow. But tomorrow morning we are the first people through those doors." He grabbed his keys and headed for the garage. "I have a meeting. Don't leave the house. Megan is working, so stay out of her way." The door slammed and the heavy lock clicked. I was alone with my daughter-in-law, or rather, I was alone in the house while she performed her life for the internet in the living room. This was my chance. I waited until I heard her start a monologue about her morning skincare routine, ensuring she was distracted, and then I began my audit. I started with the kitchen. It is often said, you can tell the state of a company by looking at its petty cash drawer. In a home, you look at the pantry. I opened the massive stainless steel Sub-Zero refrigerator. It was cavernous and impeccably clean, lit by cool blue LEDs. And it was almost entirely empty. There was a bottle of expensive champagne, likely a prop. There was a jar of artisanal mustard. And there was a single wilting head of lettuce. That was it. No milk, no eggs, no leftovers. I opened the freezer. A bag of ice and a box of frozen waffles that looked like they had been there since the previous tenants. I moved to the pantry. It was the same story. A few boxes of high-end protein bars and expensive bottled water, but no staples. No flour, no sugar, no rice. This wasn't a home. It was a stage set. They were starving in a castle. I moved quietly to the hallway where Megan had left her purse on a side table. It was a Birkin bag. Black leather gold hardware. I knew the stitching. I had audited a fashion house once. This bag cost upwards of $15,000. I leaned in close, examining the grain of the leather. It was authentic. My stomach turned. They had $15,000 for a handbag to show off on Instagram, but they couldn't afford a chair for their father or a slice of fresh pizza. It was a grotesque allocation of resources. It spoke of a narcissism so deep it overrode the basic instinct for survival. Next to the bag lay a stack of mail. Jason had been careless. He probably thought I was too blind or too stupid to read it. I picked up the envelopes. Past due. Final notice. Utility disconnection warning. I saw a letter from a leasing agency addressed to a name I didn't recognize, likely the real owners, with urgent stamped in red. And then buried at the bottom I found a credit card statement. It was addressed to me. My hands shook as I opened it. It was a platinum card I had never applied for. The balance was maxed out at $20,000. The charges were recent. Luxury car rentals, designer clothing boutiques, a 5-star hotel stay in Miami. I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. This wasn't just about the check in my pocket anymore. They had already stolen my identity. They had been bleeding me dry before I even stepped off the plane. I took a photo of the statement with my burner phone, my hand steady despite the fury coursing through my veins. This was evidence. This was a felony. I heard Megan's voice stop in the other room. I quickly put the mail back exactly as I found it and shuffled toward the hallway bathroom. I needed to wash my face. I needed to calm down before I did something rash. I entered the bathroom off the main hall. It was lined with Italian marble. The fixtures were gold-plated, but on the counter next to a bottle of face cream that cost $300 sat a roll of toilet paper. It wasn't the plush kind you expect in a mansion. It was gray thin and rough. It looked like the industrial rolls stolen from a public park or a gas station. The juxtaposition was jarring. A $300 face cream next to stolen toilet paper. It was the perfect metaphor for their lives. A shiny, expensive veneer covering a rotting, desperate core. I turned on the faucet to splash water on my face. The water ran brown for a second before clearing. The pipes were old or maybe just neglected. I decided to take a shower. The basement had left a film of grime on my skin that I couldn't stand. I found a guest shower near the pool house entrance. I turned the handle. The water was lukewarm at best. I waited hoping it would heat up. It didn't. I stripped and stepped in anyway, desperate to feel clean. I had been in the shower for maybe 5 minutes, letting the tepid water run over my tired shoulders when the door banged open. I froze, grabbing a towel to cover myself. Megan stood there. She wasn't wearing her camera-ready smile. Her face was twisted into a mask of pure ugliness. She was holding her phone, but she wasn't recording. "What do you think you are doing?" she shrieked. Her voice echoed off the tile. I blinked, water dripping from my nose. "I am taking a shower, Megan. The basement has no bathroom." She marched over and slammed her hand against the shower handle, turning the water off violently. "We are on a metered connection, Harold. Do you have any idea how much water costs in this district? You have been in there for 20 minutes. I had been in there for 5. "Megan, please," I said, clutching the towel. "I just wanted to wash up." "You are selfish," she spat. "You come into our home, you eat our food, and now you are driving up our utility bills. We are trying to run a business here. I need that hot water for my hair. If the tank runs out because you decided to have a spa day, I can't film." She looked me up and down with a sneer of absolute contempt. It wasn't just anger about the bill. It was revulsion. She looked at my aging body, my gray hair, my vulnerability, and she didn't see a human being. She saw a parasite. She saw a cost center. "Get out," she ordered, pointing to the door. "And don't use the towels. Those are Egyptian cotton for display. Use your own rags." She turned on her heel and stormed out, leaving me dripping wet on the cold tile floor. I stood there for a moment, the silence of the bathroom ringing in my ears. I felt small. I felt humiliated. But beneath the shame, the forensic accountant in me was filing away another piece of data. She wasn't worried about the environment. She wasn't worried about the water tank size. She was terrified of the bill. They were so broke they were rationing showers. They were living on the absolute edge of a cliff, and they had brought me here not to save me but to push me off first to soften their landing. I dried myself with my own old rough towel from my suitcase. I dressed slowly. My hands were no longer shaking. The sadness was gone. It had been replaced by a cold, hard clarity. They thought I was a senile old man they could bully. They didn't realize they were being audited, and the audit was nearly complete. I checked my burner phone again. I sent a single text message to my contact in Ohio. "Proceed with the trace." I walked out of the bathroom, my head high. Let them scream. Let them hoard their stolen toilet paper. Their time was running out, and the bill was coming due. I lay on the damp mattress, staring into the crushing blackness of the basement. Sleep was impossible. My body was exhausted, aching from the cold concrete floor, but my mind was racing at 100 miles an hour. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every creak of the house sounded like a jail door closing. I checked my burner phone under the blanket. 2 a.m. The silence of the house was heavy, suffocating. But then a sound broke through. It wasn't a footstep. It was a voice. It was coming from the corner of the ceiling where a rusted metal grate covered the air conditioning vent. The ductwork must have run directly from the master bedroom above straight down to this dungeon. It acted like a tin can telephone, amplifying every whisper, every rustle of sheets. I sat up. The voices were muffled but distinct. I recognized the sharp, whining tone of Megan. I dragged the small, wobbly wooden crate I used as a nightstand over to the corner. I stepped up, balancing precariously, and pressed my ear against the cold metal slats. "I can't stand it anymore, Jason," Megan hissed. Her voice was crystal clear, vibrating through the aluminum. "I can smell him from here. It is that old person smell. It is seeping into the floorboards. It is going to ruin the brand." I held my breath. My own daughter-in-law. "Keep your voice down," Jason whispered back. His voice was tired, irritable. "He is asleep." "I don't care if he is dead," Megan snapped. "In fact, that would be easier. Listen to me. The timeline has moved up. My agent called. I have a sponsorship deal with that energy drink company, but they need the content by Wednesday. They need an edgy underground vibe. This basement is perfect. The lighting, the texture of the walls. It is exactly the aesthetic they want. But I can't film down there with your father rotting on a mattress in the corner." My grip on the metal grate tightened until my knuckles turned white. She didn't want the basement for storage. She didn't want it for a guest room. She wanted it for a TikTok studio. I was being evicted for a 30-second video clip. "So what do you want me to do?" Jason asked. "Throw him out on the street? He hasn't signed the check yet. If we spook him, he freezes the account." "You heard him. He is paranoid." "We play along until Monday," Megan said. Her voice dropped an octave, becoming colder, more calculating. "We drive him to the bank. We make him sign the transfer. As soon as the funds clear, as soon as that $500,000 hits your account, we drive him to that state facility downtown, the one on Skid Row." My heart stopped. The county facility. It was a warehouse for the indigent, a place where the forgotten went to die amidst bedbugs and neglect. "Megan, that place is a hellhole," Jason said. There was a hesitation in his voice, a tiny flicker of conscience. "They have lawsuits. They have rats. He is my dad. He was your dad." Megan cut him off. "Now he is a liability." "Do you want to keep the Porsche? Do you want to keep living in this house because the landlord called again? He is coming on Tuesday with the sheriff. If we don't have that money to bribe him or pay the back rent, we are the ones on the street. We are the ones sleeping with rats. So you choose Jason, your dad or me, your dad or your life." There was a long silence. I pressed my ear harder against the grate, praying to hear my son defend me. Praying to hear him say, "No, fine," Jason said softly. His voice was defeated, hollow. "Fine. Monday. We drop him off. We tell him it is a spa resort. By the time he realizes where he is, we will be gone." "But he will make a scene," Megan argued. "He is sharp. He asks too many questions." "Did you see him looking at the mail? That is why we start the protocol tomorrow," Jason said. "I got the pills from that doctor friend of yours, the blue ones. We crushed them into his orange juice. They are heavy sedatives. In 24 hours, he won't know his own name. He will be drooling. The intake nurse at the county home will just think he has dementia. It will be easy." I stepped down from the crate. My legs were shaking, but not from fear, from a cold, absolute fury. I sat back down on the mattress in the dark. The tears didn't come. I was past tears. I had just heard my death sentence pronounced by the boy I carried on my shoulders. They weren't just going to rob me. They were going to erase me. They were going to chemically lobotomize me and dump me in a human landfill so Megan could film a dance video and Jason could drive a Porsche for another month. I looked at my hands in the dim light. They were old, wrinkled, spotted with age, but they were steady. I wasn't frail. I wasn't confused. I was Harold Bennett, and I had brought down CEOs who were smarter, richer, and more ruthless than these two amateurs. Jason thought he was choosing between his father and his life. He didn't realize he had just chosen war. I reached into my sock and pulled out the burner phone. I didn't text my lawyer this time. I texted Gus, the neighbor. I typed 3 words. I am in. I lay back down on the mattress. I closed my eyes. I needed to rest. Tomorrow, they would try to drug me. Tomorrow, they would try to break my mind. They were expecting a victim. They were expecting a helpless old man. They had no idea they were locking themselves in a cage with a wolf. Monday couldn't come fast enough. But first I had to survive the weekend. And I had to make sure that when I drank that orange juice, they were the ones who ended up swallowing the poison. The sun came up over Los Angeles with a blinding, aggressive brightness that filtered through the cracks in the basement door. I had been awake for hours, sitting on the edge of the mattress, my shoes tied tight, my mind sharpening like a blade. Today was the day they planned to drug me. Today was the day the protocol began. I knew I had a window, a very slim, dangerous window of time, before Jason came down with that glass of poisoned orange juice. I needed intel. I needed to see the paperwork they were hiding in the one room I had been strictly forbidden to enter. Jason's office. I crept up the basement stairs, testing each wooden plank for squeaks before shifting my weight. The house was silent, but it wasn't empty. I could hear the faint, rhythmic thumping of bass coming from the backyard. I moved to the kitchen window and peered through the blinds. Jason and Megan were out by the pool. Megan was in a bikini holding a pose that looked painful, while Jason circled her with his phone, shouting directions about lighting and angles. They were distracted. They were obsessed with their digital reflection. This was my chance. I tried the front door first, just to be sure. The heavy deadbolt was engaged. I tried the handle. Locked. I checked the sliding glass door in the dining room. A wooden dowel was jammed into the track. They had sealed me in. I wasn't a guest anymore. I was inventory. I turned my attention to the double doors at the end of the hallway. Jason called it his command center. He had screamed at me yesterday when I merely glanced at it, telling me it contained sensitive intellectual property. I knew better. It contained the blueprints of my destruction. I approached the doors. They were locked, of course. A standard privacy lock, the kind with a simple pin tumbler mechanism. High-end houses often cheaped out on interior hardware. I scanned the hallway for a tool. The minimalist decor worked against me. There were no knickknacks, no letter openers, no stray keys. I hurried back to the kitchen, my heart hammering against my ribs. I opened the junk drawer next to the fridge. It was a mess of takeout menus, rubber bands, and broken pens. I dug through the debris, my fingers trembling slightly. Not from age, but from adrenaline. I found it. A single silver paperclip. It was flimsy, cheap metal, but it was all I had. I straightened it out, bending one end into a small hook and leaving the other straight to use as a tension wrench. I had learned this trick 30 years ago from a security consultant during an audit of a bank vault. I never thought I would use it to break into my own son's office to save my life. I ran back to the hallway. I could hear Megan's voice rising outside. She was yelling at Jason about the shadows falling across her face. They were arguing. Good. Anger makes people distracted. I knelt before the doorknob. The marble floor was cold against my knees. I inserted the straight end of the paperclip into the bottom of the keyhole, applying a slight rotational pressure. Then I slid the hooked end in feeling for the pins. Click. 1 pin set. My breath hitched. I needed to be faster. My hands, usually so steady when reviewing spreadsheets, felt clumsy. Sweat trickled down my temples, stinging my eyes. I couldn't wipe it away. I had to maintain the tension. I felt for the second pin. It was stubborn. I wiggled the wire. Nothing. I pushed harder. The paperclip bent. Damn it, I whispered. I pulled it out. It was twisted, useless. I tried to reshape it, but the metal was fatigued. It would snap if I tried again. I needed something stronger. I looked around frantically. The hallway was empty. I checked my pockets. Nothing but lint and the burner phone. Then I remembered. The basement. I scrambled back down the stairs, moving as fast as my old legs would carry me. I went to the small wooden crate I used as a nightstand. A loose nail was protruding from the side. I grabbed the crate and yanked the nail back and forth, working it loose from the rotten wood. It came free with a small screech that sounded like a gunshot in the silence. I froze, looking up at the ceiling. The bass outside continued. They hadn't heard. I ran back up. The nail was too thick for the lock. I was losing time. I could hear the music outside stop. Were they coming in? I needed something thin but rigid. I looked at the kitchen counter again. There, sitting in a bowl of decorative fruit that was probably plastic, was a bobby pin. Megan must have left it there. I grabbed it. I stripped the rubber tip off with my teeth. I bent it. This was better. High-tensile steel. I ran back to the office door. I knelt. I inserted the pin. The first pin set immediately. The second clicked into place. I felt the third. It was binding. I applied just a hair more pressure. Click. The cylinder turned. The lock disengaged with a soft, satisfying thud. I didn't open the door immediately. I pressed my ear against the wood, listening. Silence inside. I slowly turned the handle and pushed. The door swung open on well-oiled hinges. I slipped inside and closed the door behind me, leaving it just a crack open so I wouldn't lock myself in. The room smelled of stale vape smoke and desperation. It was a chaotic mess. Papers were strewn everywhere. The minimalism of the rest of the house didn't apply here. This was the engine room of their fraud. I moved to the massive mahogany desk. It was covered in stacks of paper. I started sifting through them, my eyes scanning for my name. I found unpaid bills. I found lawsuits from previous landlords. I found a letter from a collection agency threatening to possess the Porsche. And then I found the file. It was a manila folder, thick and heavy. On the tab, written in Jason's handwriting, was a single word: Project Dad. My stomach turned. I opened it. The first page was a printout of my bank account balance obtained illegally. The second was a timeline. Arrival, sedation, transfer, liquidation. But it was what I found underneath the timeline that made my knees buckle. It wasn't just financial documents. It was a medical file. A fake medical file. I saw letterhead from a doctor I didn't know. Dr. Eris Thorne. I read the diagnosis. Early onset dementia, paranoia, violent tendencies. The date on the diagnosis was 3 weeks ago. I hadn't even been in the state 3 weeks ago. They had diagnosed me before I even arrived. I flipped the page. There was a guardianship application fully filled out waiting for a signature, and clipped to the back was a brochure. Sunnyvale State Facility. I knew Sunnyvale. It wasn't a retirement home. It was a warehouse for the mentally ill and the indigent. It was a place people went to disappear. I heard the sliding glass door in the dining room slide open. The sound of laughter. They were inside. I froze. I was in the lion's den holding the evidence of my own demise, and the lions had just come home to eat. I looked around the room for a hiding place, but there was nowhere. The desk was open underneath. The closet was full of boxes. Dad, Jason's voice called out from the kitchen. Dad, where are you? I brought you some juice. The juice. The poison. I shoved the papers back into the folder, but I kept one. The fake diagnosis. I folded it and shoved it into my sock next to the burner phone. I had seconds. I couldn't go out the door. He would see me. I looked at the window. It was latched. I looked at the vent in the floor. too small. Dad Jason called again, closer this time. He was in the hallway. I did the only thing I could do. I sat down in his leather chair, swiveled it to face the door, and waited. If I was going to go down, I was going to go down looking him in the eye. But as I gripped the armrests, my hand brushed against a small, cold metal object taped under the desk. A key. I ripped it off. It was a small silver key, the kind that opens a lockbox. I looked down. There was a small safe bolted to the floor. I didn't have time to open it, but I pocketed the key. The doorknob turned. Jason pushed the door open. He stopped dead when he saw me sitting in his chair. The glass of orange juice in his hand trembled, the liquid sloshing over the rim. "What are you doing in here?" he whispered, his face going pale. I looked at him. I didn't blink. "I was looking for a pen, son," I said, my voice steady as a rock. "I wanted to write you a thank you note for your hospitality." He stared at me, trying to gauge how much I had seen. He looked at the messy desk. He looked at the closed folder. He didn't know. He couldn't know. Get out, he hissed. "Get out now." I stood up slowly. I walked past him. I could smell the crushed pills in the juice. It smelled bitter. I walked into the hallway, my back to him, expecting a blow that never came. I had the evidence. I had the key. And now I knew exactly what I was fighting. The game had changed. I wasn't just playing defense anymore. I was going on the offense. I stood in the hallway, my heart pounding a rhythm against my ribs that felt like a war drum. Jason had stormed off toward the kitchen, where Megan was screaming about the Wi-Fi signal, dropping, leaving the office door slightly ajar. He was careless. Arrogance always breeds carelessness. I felt the small silver key burning a hole in my pocket. I knew exactly what it was for. In my brief moment in his chair, I had seen the outline of a floor safe beneath the desk, half hidden by a rug. That was where the real secrets lived. Paperwork on a desk is for show. Steel safes are for the things that can send you to prison. I checked the corridor. Empty. The argument in the kitchen was escalating, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of entitlement and stress. I slipped back into the office, moving with the silent precision of a ghost. I knelt by the desk and threw back the rug. There it was. A sentry-safe, fireproof heavy. I inserted the silver key. It turned smoothly. The heavy door clicked open. Inside, it wasn't gold or cash. It was plastic. A stack of credit cards 3 inches thick, bound together with a rubber band. I pulled them out and fanned them across the leather desktop. My breath hitched. They were all shiny new and terrifyingly familiar. Chase Sapphire, Amex Platinum, Citi Prestige. But it wasn't the banks that made my blood run cold. It was the name embossed on every single one of them. Harold Bennett. They hadn't just stolen my identity, they had cloned it. I picked up the top card. The activation sticker was still on it, dated 3 months ago. I dug deeper into the safe and found the corresponding statements crumpled into a ball and shoved in the back. I smoothed them out, my forensic eye scanning the columns of numbers. It was an autopsy of my financial murder. The balances were maxed out. $25,000 on the Visa, $50,000 on the Amex. And the purchases were a grotesque litany of their vanity. A $4,000 dinner at Nobu. A $12,000 consulting fee to a brand management agency that I suspected didn't exist. Flight tickets to Tulum for 2 first class. They were wearing my credit score like a costume. They were eating my retirement. I pulled out my burner phone. My hands were steady, fueled by a cold, clinical rage. Click. Photo of the cards. Click. Photo of the statements showing the dates and the fraudulent signatures. They had practiced my signature. It was shaky, a poor imitation, but good enough to fool an algorithm. Then I saw the manila envelope at the bottom of the safe. It was marked Medical Confidential. This wasn't the Project Dad folder from the desk. This was the source material. I opened it. It was the original draft of the competency evaluation. It was signed by Dr. Aris Thorne. I read the clinical notes, and my stomach turned. The doctor described a patient he had never met. Subject exhibits advanced cognitive decline, it read. Disoriented to time and place. Episodes of aggression. Incontinent. Incontinent. They were painting me as an animal to justify putting me in a cage. But it was the next page that was the smoking gun. It was an email printout, a correspondence between Jason and this Dr. Thorne. Payment received, the email read. The diagnosis is ready. Per your request, we have emphasized the violent outbursts to expedite the emergency guardianship order. This will allow you to bypass the standard 30-day observation period. Expedite. Bypass. They weren't just following a process. They were buying a fast pass to my destruction. They had paid a bribe to strip me of my human rights. I looked at the date on the email. It was sent 2 days before they even called to invite me to Los Angeles. The invitation wasn't an olive branch. It was an extraction order. I photographed the email. I photographed the doctor's license number. I photographed the fake diagnosis. Every click of the shutter was a nail in their coffin. I was building a case file that would put them away for decades. Elder abuse, wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy. It was a prosecutor's dream. Suddenly, the shouting in the kitchen stopped. The silence was more terrifying than the noise. I heard heavy footsteps approaching the hallway. I'm telling you, the router is in the office. Jason's voice boomed closer now. I'll reset it. I shoved the papers back into the envelope. I threw the credit cards back into the safe. I slammed the heavy metal door shut and locked it, sliding the key into my pocket. I kicked the rug back over the safe. I had seconds. I couldn't make it to the door without being seen. I looked around frantically, the heavy velvet curtains covering the window. It was a cliché, but it was my only option. I dove behind the drapes, pressing my back against the glass, just as the office door swung open. See? Jason said, his voice thick with irritation. The lights are green. The internet is fine. It's your phone, Megan. It's not my phone! Megan shrieked, entering the room. I could see her shadow through the gap in the curtains. It's this house. It's cursed. The upload failed at 99%. Do you know what that does to the algorithm? I don't care about the algorithm, Jason yelled. I care about the $500,000. Is he still in the basement? I don't know. I haven't checked, Megan snapped. I told you to lock him in. I did, Jason said. He walked over to the desk. I held my breath. He was inches away from me. I could smell his cologne, a cloying, expensive musk that masked the scent of his fear. He sat down in the chair I had just vacated. I heard him shuffling papers. Wait, where is the project folder? My heart stopped. I had put it back, hadn't I? It was right here, Jason muttered. I left it on top of the pile. Maybe you moved it, Megan said dismissively. You're a mess, Jason. You lose everything. I don't lose financial documents, he snapped. Then silence. I could feel him scanning the room. The chair, he whispered. The chair is warm. I squeezed my eyes shut. I gripped the burner phone in my hand, ready to use it as a weapon if I had to. You're paranoid, Megan said. You've been sitting in it all morning. Come on, fix the Wi-Fi or I'm leaving. Jason hesitated. I could hear his breathing heavy and uneven. Finally, he stood up. Fine, but we're doubling the dose tonight. I don't like this. He's too quiet. They left the room. The door didn't click shut this time. I waited a full 2 minutes before I dared to breathe. I slipped out from behind the curtains, my body trembling with adrenaline. I had the photos. I had the proof. Now I just needed to survive the night. I crept back to the hallway, but instead of heading to the basement, I moved toward the kitchen. They were talking about doubling the dose. That meant the orange juice tonight would be lethal. I needed a countermeasure. I needed to make sure that when the curtain fell on this little drama, I wasn't the one sleeping. I reached into my pocket and touched the cold metal of the safe key. It was my insurance policy. But the photos on my phone, those were my weapon, and I was about to load the gun. The sun began to set, casting long, bruised shadows across the empty living room floor. I sat on a folding chair Jason had begrudgingly brought up from the garage, my hands folded in my lap, waiting. The air in the house was static, charged with a nervous energy that usually precedes a storm. I checked my watch. 7 o'clock. The witching hour. The front door opened with a heavy thud. Jason and Megan walked in, but they weren't alone. Trailing behind them was a man who looked like he had slept in his car. He was wearing a suit that was 2 sizes too big, the fabric shiny with wear at the elbows. He carried a battered leather medical bag that looked more like a prop from a high school play than a physician's toolkit. This must be the illustrious Dr. Aris Thorne. I didn't stand up. I didn't smile. I let my mouth hang open slightly, my eyes unfocused. I was already setting the stage. "Dad." Jason said, his voice overly loud and cheerful, like he was talking to a toddler. "Look who is here. This is Dr. Thorne. He is a concierge doctor. Very exclusive. He stopped by to give you a little vitamin booster. You have looked so pale since you got here." The doctor stepped forward. He smelled of stale cigarettes and peppermint gum. He didn't wash his hands. He didn't introduce himself. He just loomed over me, his eyes darting around the room as if checking for security cameras. "Hello, Harold," the doctor said. His voice was greasy. "Jason tells me you have been having some trouble with your memory. Confusion. Agitation." I blinked slowly. "Who are you?" and I asked, slurring the words just a fraction. "I am a friend," he said. He reached into his bag. He didn't pull out a stethoscope or a blood pressure cuff. He pulled out a small amber prescription bottle with no label. He shook it. The rattle sounded like bones. "We are going to start you on a new protocol, Harold. It is a cognitive supplement. Very high-end. It will help you focus. It will clear up that fog." He poured 2 pills into his palm. They weren't vitamins. They were bright electric blue, and they were enormous. I recognized them immediately from my time auditing pharmaceutical supply chains. They looked like high-dose sedatives, the kind used to tranquilize patients in psychiatric holds to keep them compliant during transport. Doubling the dose, Jason had said. This wasn't a supplement. It was a chemical sledgehammer. "Here," Megan said, thrusting a glass of water at me. Her hand was shaking. She was excited. She wanted this over. "Drink up, Harold. It is good for you." I looked at the pills in the doctor's dirty palm. Then I looked at my son. He was watching me with a predator's intensity, his jaw clenched tight. If I refused, they would force me. I knew it. They were past the point of no return. If I fought, they would claim I was having a violent episode and call the authorities immediately. I had to play their game, but I had to cheat. I reached out with a trembling hand. I let my fingers brush against the doctor's palm, making sure to exaggerate the tremors. I picked up the pills. They felt heavy, chalky. "Thank you," I whispered. I don't want to be confused anymore." "Good, Dad." Jason said, exhaling a breath he must have been holding. "Just take them." I raised the pills to my lips. I opened my mouth. I tossed them in. But I didn't swallow. I used an old trick I learned from a whistleblower who spent time in federal prison. I slid the pills instantly under my tongue, pressing them deep into the soft tissue floor of my mouth. I took a large gulp of water, holding the liquid in my cheeks, swishing it around to simulate swallowing, and then gulped loudly. I opened my mouth to show them, lifting my tongue just enough to hide the blue death beneath it. "Good boy," Megan said. She actually patted my head. The condescension made my blood boil, but I kept my face slack. "Now rest," the doctor said, closing his bag. "It kicks in fast." I waited for them to turn away. As soon as Jason turned to high-five the doctor, I brought my hand up to my mouth in a fake coughing fit. Water went down the wrong pipe I hacked, covering my mouth with a thick white handkerchief I had pulled from my pocket. I spat the pills into the folds of the cloth, wiping my mouth vigorously to mask the action. I crumpled the handkerchief into a tight ball and shoved it deep into my pocket. It was done. The poison was in my pocket, not my blood. But now came the hard part. The performance. I waited 2 minutes. Then I let my eyelids droop. I let my head loll to the side. I dropped the water glass. It hit the marble floor and shattered, the sound echoing through the empty house. "Oops," I mumbled, my words thick and heavy. I dropped. Jason spun around. He didn't look concerned about the glass. He looked triumphant. "It is working," he whispered to Megan. "Look at him. He is already fading." Megan laughed. It was a cruel, sharp sound. That was fast. "Dr. Thorne, you are a wizard." I slumped forward in the chair, staring blankly at my shoes. I let a line of drool escape the corner of my mouth. It was humiliating but necessary. I needed them to believe I was gone. I needed them to think the lights were out so they would start talking in the dark. Jason walked over and waved a hand in front of my face. "Dad." "Can you hear me, Dad?" I didn't blink. I stared right through him. "He is out," Jason said, grinning. "He is totally vegetable." Megan walked over and kicked my foot. Gently, but with disrespect. "He looks disgusting. We can't keep him here until Friday like this. He is going to wet himself." "We will take him to the bank tomorrow morning," Jason said, turning to the doctor. "Can you write the certification now? We need the paper that says he is incapacitated but compliant." The doctor sat at the kitchen island, pulling a pad from his bag. "Consider it done. For an extra $5,000, I will write that he has been my patient for 10 years. "Do it," Jason said. "Write it up. We are taking the money, we are dumping him at the state facility, and then we are going to celebrate." I sat there, a statue of senility, listening to them barter over the price of my life. They thought I was asleep. They thought I was broken. But inside my mind was a steel trap recording every word, every bribe, every threat. They were celebrating their victory. They didn't know they were writing their own confessions. And tomorrow, when they dragged me to the bank, they were going to find out that the vegetable in the back seat was the one driving the car. The roar of the rental Porsche's engine faded down the canyon road, taking the thumping bass and my captors with it. Silence rushed back into the mansion, heavy and suffocating. I didn't move immediately. I sat in the dark living room, counting the seconds, waiting to ensure they hadn't forgotten a phone charger or a wallet. 5 minutes passed. 10. I stood up. The slack-jawed, drooling invalid vanished. In his place stood a man with a singular purpose. I wiped the spit from my chin with my sleeve and moved to the window. Jason and Megan were gone to celebrate my destruction. They were likely at some velvet-roped club on Sunset Boulevard, spending money they didn't have on champagne they couldn't taste, toasting to the demise of the old man they had left rotting in their living room. They thought the blue pills were dissolving in my stomach. They thought the house was sealed tight. They were arrogant, and arrogance is the father of failure. I went to the sliding glass door at the back of the house. It was blocked by a wooden dowel in the track, a crude security measure. I used the bobby pin I had saved from the morning to hook the wood and slide it free. It clattered to the floor. I held my breath, waiting for an alarm. Nothing. They hadn't set the perimeter alarm because they were too cheap to pay the subscription fee. I slid the door open and stepped out into the cool night air. The backyard was a disaster of neglected potential. The infinity pool was half empty and green with algae. The landscaping was overgrown. But I wasn't looking at the view. I was looking at the 6-foot retaining wall that separated this property from the neighbors. Gus, the crazy man with the hose, he was my only hope. I approached the wall. Vines covered the stucco thick and woody. I was 71 years old. My joints ached from sleeping on concrete. My hands were shaking from hunger and adrenaline. But I didn't have a choice. I gripped the vines. They cut into my palms. I found a foothold in the crumbling plaster. I pulled. My body screamed in protest. I wasn't a young man anymore. I dragged myself up inch by agonizing inch, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I threw a leg over the top of the wall and tumbled down the other side, landing hard in a bed of well-manicured hydrangeas. I lay there for a moment, staring up at the stars, waiting for my heart to stop hammering against my ribs. I was in enemy territory, or at least neutral ground. Suddenly a floodlight blinded me. A beam of intense white light pinned me to the grass. "Don't move," a voice growled. It sounded like grinding gears. "I have a shotgun, and I am not afraid of the paperwork." I shielded my eyes. It was Gus. He was standing on his patio wearing a bathrobe and combat boots, leveling a double-barreled shotgun at my chest. He looked like a deranged guardian angel. "Gus," I wheezed, raising my hands slowly. "It is me, Harold, the Mark." He didn't lower the gun. "You are supposed to be inside," he barked. "I saw them leave. Why aren't you drugged? Why aren't you drooling, or are you one of them? Did they send you to steal my copper wiring?" I sat up slowly, keeping my hands visible. "They tried to drug me, Gus. I didn't swallow. And I am not here to steal your wiring. I am here to offer you a trade." "A trade?" He spat, bunt on the grass. "What could a squatter's dad possibly have that I want?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out the folded papers I had stolen from the safe. I pulled out my burner phone. I held them up in the spotlight. "I have the ledger," I said, my voice gaining strength. "I know you hate them. I know they have made your life hell for 6 months, with their loud music, and their trash, and their arrogance. I know you have called the cops 10 times, and they never do anything because of tenant protection laws." Gus lowered the gun an inch. He was listening. "I can get them out," I said. "Not in 6 months. Not in a year. I can get them out this week. But I need your help. I need a base of operations. And I need your Wi-Fi." Gus stared at me. He looked at the mansion next door, dark and silent. He looked back at me, a disheveled old man sitting in his flower bed. He lowered the gun completely. "Get up," he grunted. "You are crushing my hydrangeas." I followed him into his house. It was the opposite of Jason's. It was small, cluttered, and smelled of pipe tobacco and old books, but it was real. It was warm. It was a home. He led me to the kitchen table and poured 2 fingers of whiskey into a glass. He didn't offer me any water. He just slammed the glass down in front of me. "Talk," he said, "and make it good." I drank the whiskey in one burn. It cleared the fog in my head. I opened the papers on his table. I showed him the photos on my phone. "My son isn't just a bad neighbor, Gus. He is a criminal. He is carrying $2 million in bad debt. He has defrauded 3 banks. He has stolen my identity. And right now, he is squatting in that house on a forged lease that expires in 48 hours. But he thinks he has bought himself another month by bribing a clerk at the county recorder's office." Gus leaned in, putting on a pair of thick spectacles. He looked at the numbers. He looked at the fake medical diagnosis. He whistled low. "They were going to commit you," he whispered. He looked at me with a new expression. "Respect." "Yes," I said. "They are planning to dump me at Sunnyvale on Monday after they drain my accounts. But they made a mistake. They didn't check my resume. I used to hunt people who hide money for a living. I found the shell companies Jason is using to hide his assets from the bankruptcy court. I found the offshore gambling debts. I pointed to a specific line on the spreadsheet I had reconstructed. Here. This is the leverage. Jason didn't just stiff the landlord. He borrowed money from a private equity fund that is actually a front for an organized crime syndicate out of Vegas. He owes them $50,000 by Friday. He thinks my money is going to pay them off. Gus looked up, his eyes wide. So if he doesn't pay... Exactly, I said. If he doesn't pay, he doesn't just lose the house. He loses his kneecaps. But I don't want him dead. I want him in prison. I want him exposed. And to do that, I need to intercept the transfer. I need to make him believe he has won until the very last second. Gus sat back, crossing his arms. So what do you need from me? I need you to be my eyes, I said. I need to go back in there before dawn. I need to keep playing the senile old fool. But I need you to contact a lawyer for me, a specific lawyer in Ohio who handles federal cases. My phone is compromised and I can't risk them tracking the call. And on Friday, I need you to crash a party. A party? Gus asked, a slow grin spreading across his weathered face. Jason is throwing a gala, I said. He is inviting all his fake friends to witness me signing over my assets. He wants an audience for his triumph. I want to give him one. But I need someone to run the audio visuals. I need someone to make sure that when he hits play on his tribute video, the screen shows the truth instead. Gus stood up. He walked to a cabinet and pulled out a bottle of expensive scotch. He poured 2 more glasses. I was in the Signal Corps in '68, Gus said. I can hack a Bluetooth projector in my sleep. He handed me the glass. He clinked it against mine. To bad neighbors, he said. To eviction, I replied. We drank. For the first time since I arrived in Los Angeles, I felt safe. I had an ally. I had a plan. And I had the ammunition. I looked at the clock on Gus's wall. It was 3 a.m. Jason and Megan would be stumbling home soon, drunk on their perceived victory. I had to go back. I had to climb that wall again and crawl back into my cage. But this time I wasn't a prisoner. I was a spy. And the countdown had begun. Gus handed me a heavy rotary phone that looked like it had been pulled from a Cold War bunker. It was secure, he assured me. A landline that didn't appear on any digital registry. I dialed the number for the only person in the world I trusted to hold the nuclear launch codes for my life. Ms. Evelyn Carter. It was 3:30 a.m. in Los Angeles, which meant it was 6:30 in Ohio. Evelyn would be awake. She didn't sleep. She waited. She was 80 years old, a retired federal prosecutor who now ran a boutique firm specializing in complex fraud. She had a mind like a razor blade and a heart made of tungsten. The phone rang twice. Bennett, a voice rasped on the other end. You are supposed to be sipping margaritas by a pool. Why are you calling me on an unlisted number? I am not sipping margaritas, Evelyn. I said, my voice steady despite the fatigue dragging at my bones. I am in a basement in Beverly Hills. I am being held prisoner by my son. There was a silence on the line, the kind of heavy, dangerous silence that usually preceded an indictment. Explain, she said. I gave her the summary, the forensic summary. I stripped away the emotion and gave her the data points. The fake eviction notice, the squatting, the identity theft, the forged medical records, the blue pills, the plan to dump me at Sunnyvale. I listed the statutes they had violated one by one. Elder abuse, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit murder. When I finished, I heard the sound of a lighter clicking followed by a long exhale. I always knew that boy was bad news, Evelyn said. He has your charm but none of your spine. So what is the play, Harold? Do you want me to call the FBI right now? I can have a SWAT team at that door in 20 minutes. No, I said. Not yet. If we arrest them now, they claim ignorance. They claim it was a misunderstanding. They claim I am senile and they were just trying to help. They have the fake medical paperwork, Evelyn. It is their word against a confused old man's. So you want to nail them to the wall, she concluded. I want them to confess, I said. Publicly, irrevocably. I want to trap them in a lie so big they can't climb out of it. The honeypot, Evelyn said. I could hear the smile in her voice. You want to give them exactly what they want. Jason is desperate, I explained. He owes $50,000 to loan sharks by Friday. He needs my assets to clear. He thinks I am mentally slipping. I want to lean into that. I want to tell him that I am terrified of losing my mind and that I want to sign everything over to him immediately. Total power of attorney. Access to the trust. Everything. But the trust is locked, Evelyn noted. You moved the $2 million into the Irrevocable Veterans Fund last month. He can't touch it. He doesn't know that, I said. He thinks the check in my pocket is real. He thinks the accounts are open. I want him to set up a signing ceremony. He loves spectacle. He wants to show off to his friends that he is the dutiful son taking over the family empire. I want him to invite everyone. And when he hands me the pen, I walk in, Evelyn finished. With the federal agents. Exactly, I said. But I need you here, Evelyn. I need you to bring the original trust documents. I need you to me the hammer. I will take the first flight out, she said. I will be there by tomorrow afternoon. I will stay at a hotel downtown. You keep playing the victim herald. Don't break character. If they suspect you are lucid for even a second, they might panic and do something violent. They already tried, I said, looking at the bruise forming on my arm from climbing the wall. I can handle them. Be careful, Harold, she said, her voice softening for the first time. You are a brilliant auditor, but you are still a father. Don't let him see you bleed. I hung up the phone. Gus was watching me from the kitchen table, nursing his whiskey. He nodded once. Your lawyer sounds like she eats nails for breakfast. She prefers barbed wire, I said. I stood up. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. I have to go back. If they come home and find the basement empty, the game is over. Take this, Gus said. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a small canister of pepper spray. It fits in your pocket. If they try the pills again, or if that son of yours gets physical, you blind him. I took the canister. It felt cold and heavy. I hoped I wouldn't need it. I hoped my acting skills were enough. I climbed back over the wall as the first gray light of dawn began to bleed into the sky. The descent was harder than the ascent. My muscles seized. I tumbled onto the overgrown lawn of Jason's rental, stifling a groan. I lay in the wet grass for a moment, listening. The house was still silent. They weren't back yet. I managed to slide the glass door open and lock it behind me using the bobby pin to reset the latch. I crept through the house, leaving no trace. I went down to the basement. I stripped off my clothes, hiding the grass-stained trousers at the very bottom of my suitcase inside a laundry bag. I put on my pajamas. I messed up my hair. I splashed water on my face to look sweaty and disoriented. Then I sat on the mattress and waited. At 6 a.m, I heard the front door open. Laughter. Stumbling footsteps. They were drunk. They were high on the fumes of my imaginary money. Shh, Megan giggled. You will wake the vegetable. Let him sleep, Jason slurred. Tomorrow is payday. They went upstairs. I heard the bedroom door close. I waited another hour to be safe. Then I began to scream. It wasn't a scream of pain. It was a scream of confusion. I wailed. I shouted names of people who had been dead for 20 years. Martha, the stove. The stove is on. I heard running footsteps. The basement door flew open. Jason stood there, shirtless, eyes wide with panic. What the hell is going on? He shouted. I looked at him, my eyes wide and terrified. I didn't see him. I looked through him. "Who are you? Where is my ledger? The numbers are wrong. The numbers are falling." I grabbed his arm, digging my fingers in. "I am losing it, stranger. I feel it slipping away. My mind, it is going dark." Jason looked at me with disgust, but also with excitement. He pulled his arm away. "Dad, calm down. It is me, Jason." "Oh, Jason," I whispered, looking around the concrete room. "Jason is a boy. You are old. Listen to me. The money. I have to protect the money." Jason froze. He leaned in. "What about the money, Dad?" "I don't remember the codes," I cried, rocking back and forth. "I am forgetting the codes. If I forget, the bank locks it. Forever. It goes to the state. I need to give it to someone. I need to sign it away before the fog takes it." I grabbed his shirt. "Help me. I need to sign it over. Today. Now. Before I forget my own name." Jason's eyes lit up. It was the look of a man who had just hit the jackpot. He looked up the stairs at Megan, who was standing there in her silk robe. He grinned. "Okay, Dad," Jason said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "I can help. We can do that. We can make sure the money is safe." "Do it," I begged. "Bring the papers. Bring the witnesses. I need everyone to see. I need to make it legal, a party, a ceremony, so no one can take it from you." "A party?" Megan asked from the stairs. She perked up. "Like a content opportunity." "Yes," I rambled. "A celebration, a transfer of legacy. Do it, Friday, please." Jason looked at Megan. Megan looked at Jason. They didn't see a trap. They saw a viral moment. They saw a solution to every problem they had. "Friday," Jason said. "We will do it Friday." I collapsed back onto the mattress, sobbing fake tears of relief. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you." Jason turned off the light and closed the door. I heard them laughing on the stairs. They were already spending the money. They were already planning the guest list. I lay in the dark, my hand clutching the pepper spray in my pocket. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Now all I had to do was wait for the sharks to arrive. And when they did, I would be the one holding the harpoon. The morning sun sliced through the dusty blinds of the living room, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the stagnant air. I sat on the floor, wrapped in a blanket, rocking back and forth with a rhythmic, calculated motion. I had been keeping this up for an hour, waiting for Jason to come out of his bedroom. I needed to look like a man whose hard drive was crashing, a man desperate to offload his data before the screen went black forever. When I finally heard his door open, I ramped up the performance. I started muttering numbers, random strings of digits mixed with names of dead pets and childhood streets. Jason walked in wearing a silk robe that I knew he hadn't paid for. He looked hungover but electric with anticipation. He stopped when he saw me. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't offer me water. He just watched like a man watching a slot machine spin, waiting for the 3 cherries to line up. I looked up at him, widening my eyes until they watered. "Jason," I wheezed. "The codes. They are fading." I tried to write them down, but my hand won't listen. He crouched down, maintaining a safe distance, as if senility were contagious. "It is okay, Dad. We talked about this. Friday. We are doing it Friday." No, I cried out, clutching at the air. "Friday is too far. The fog is getting thicker. I need to make sure it is legal. I need to make sure no one can take it away from you. If I forget, the government takes it. They take everything. You have to lock it down." I saw the panic flare in his eyes. The threat of the government seizure was a stroke of genius. Nothing motivates a con artist faster than the fear of the state beating them to the prize. "We will lock it down," Jason promised, his voice trembling with greed. We will get the lawyer. We will get the notary. You need witnesses, I rambled, grabbing his wrist with a desperate strength. Not just one. Many. Reputable people. If there are no witnesses, they will say you forced me. They will say I was crazy. You need a crowd, Jason. You need to show them I am giving it to you with a glad heart. A ceremony. A legacy. Make it big. Make it undeniable. I watched the gears turn in his head. He was thinking about his loan sharks. He was thinking about the eviction notice. But mostly, he was thinking about his ego. He didn't just want the money. He wanted the vindication. He wanted to stand in front of all the people he had lied to and prove that he really was the heir to a fortune. He wanted to rub their noses in his success. Megan appeared at the top of the stairs, her phone already in her hand. She was filming us. I kept rocking, kept muttering. Did you hear that, babe? Jason called up to her. He wants a crowd. He wants a legacy ceremony. Megan lowered the phone, her eyes lighting up with a predatory gleam. A ceremony like a gala. We could brand it. The Bennett succession. I can get the event planner who did the launch for that crypto scam last month. She owes me a favor. We can fill this place. We can live stream it. Do it, I whispered, letting my head loll back. Fill the house, let them see. I want everyone to know my son, my good son. Jason stood up, energized. He pulled me up from the floor, not gently, but with the rough haste of someone handling a heavy bag of cash. Okay, Dad. You got it. We are going to throw the biggest party this street has ever seen. But you need to rest. You need to save your strength for the signature. He led me back to the basement door. He didn't even offer me breakfast. He just wanted me stored away until showtime. I stumbled down the stairs, letting out a low moan of confusion for effect. As soon as the lock clicked, I straightened my back. I sat on the mattress and exhaled. They had taken the bait. They weren't just going to invite a few friends. They were going to invite the whole world. For the rest of the day, the house above me vibrated with frantic activity. I could hear furniture being dragged across the floor. They were renting staging furniture to fill the empty rooms, trying to make the house look inhabited and prosperous for the guests. I heard the doorbell ringing incessantly. Caterers, florists, valet services. They were spending money they didn't have, putting it all on credit lines that were days away from defaulting, betting everything on the Friday payout. I spent the time in the dark preparing my own arsenal. I reviewed the photos on my burner phone, the credit card statements, the fake medical diagnosis, the emails with the forger. I organized them into a digital folder. I wrote a script in my head, rehearsing the exact words I would say when I took the microphone. I wasn't just going to expose them. I was going to dismantle them. Around noon, the air conditioning vent rattled. I climbed up on the crate and pressed my ear to the metal. Jason was on the phone in the master bedroom. Yeah, man, it is happening, he was saying. His voice was loud, boastful. Friday night, the old man is signing over the whole estate. Liquid assets, properties, the works. Yeah, I know I owe you. I told you I am good for it. Bring the boss. Seriously, invite him. I want him to see the money transfer live. I will have the cash for you by Monday morning. I smiled in the darkness. He was inviting the loan sharks. He was inviting the very people who would break his legs if he didn't pay. He was building a pressure cooker and locking himself inside. A few hours later, I heard Megan's voice. She was talking to someone in the living room. So the lighting needs to be dramatic, she was saying. When Harold signs the papers, I want a spotlight on him. Make him look frail but noble. You know. Like he is passing the torch. And then boom, confetti cannons. Can we do confetti cannons? I almost laughed. Confetti cannons. She wanted to turn my financial execution into a circus. But then the conversation shifted. And what about the doctor? Megan asked. Is he coming? Yeah, a deeper voice replied. It must have been the forger, Paul. He is bringing the notary, and the papers are ready. We backdated the competency evaluation just in case anyone asks. It says he has been lucid up until this week, so the transfer looks like his last rational act. Perfect, Megan said. And after the party, the van will be waiting out back, the man said. We will load him up right after the cake. Midnight run to Sunnyvale. By the time the guests are sober, he will be a John Doe in the state system. My grip on the crate tightened. They had it all mapped out. The party, the signature, the disposal. It was cold. It was efficient. It was exactly the kind of plan I used to dismantle for a living. I climbed down and sat on the mattress. I checked my phone. A text from Gus. Everything is set. Projector is hacked. I have remote access to their sound system. Your lawyer lands at 4. We are ready. I typed back. They are inviting the sharks and the forger. Gus replied instantly. Good. More rats for the trap. I lay back and closed my eyes. I was hungry. I hadn't eaten a real meal in 2 days. My stomach rumbled a hollow ache that fueled my resolve. They were upstairs eating sushi and drinking wine toasting to their brilliance. They thought they were the predators. They thought I was the prey. But they had forgotten the first rule of the jungle. The old lion isn't old because he is weak. He is old because he is the best survivor. Friday was coming, and I was going to give them a show they would never forget. I was going to give them the performance of a lifetime. And when the confetti cannons fired, they wouldn't be celebrating a windfall. They would be celebrating the end of their freedom. I closed my hand around the key in my pocket. The key to the safe. The key to their destruction. I was ready. Let the party begin. Friday night arrived with the thumping bass of a rented sound system that shook the very foundations of the hollow mansion. The transformation was miraculous and sickening. In the span of 6 hours, the empty shell of a house had been filled with white rental sofas, towering floral arrangements that smelled of funeral lilies, and a bar stocked with top-shelf liquor that I knew Jason had charged to my stolen credit card. The lighting was dimmed to a moody blue, hiding the dust and the scuff marks on the floors, creating an illusion of effortless wealth. It was a stage set for the performance of a lifetime, and I was the prop. I sat in the center of the living room, trapped in a rusted wheelchair that Jason had bought from a surplus store that morning. My legs worked perfectly fine, but the narrative required a cripple. They had stripped me of my dignity along with my clothes. My suit, the one I had worn to board meetings and federal hearings, was gone. In its place, they had dressed me in a moth-eaten beige cardigan that smelled of attic dust, and a pair of trousers that were 2 sizes too big, cinched with a rope instead of a belt. They had even messed up my hair, plastering it down with water to make my scalp show, to make me look frail, thinning, and pathetic. I wasn't Harold Bennett, the forensic accountant. I was the before picture in a makeover show. I was the burden. The room was packed. There were at least 50 people, a sea of strangers holding champagne flutes and smartphones. These were Megan's friends, the influencers and social climbers of Los Angeles. I watched them with my auditor's eye. I saw the rented tuxedos that didn't quite fit. I saw the designer bags that were excellent counterfeits. I saw the desperate glances they cast at the camera lenses, terrified of not being seen. They weren't here for me. They were here for the open bar and the proximity to what they thought was a $10 million fortune. But not everyone was a fake. In the back of the room, leaning against a pillar, stood 3 men who didn't fit the aesthetic. They wore ill-fitting suits and had the thick necks of men who solved problems with their fists. The one in the middle, a man with a scar running through his eyebrow, was staring at Jason with the unblinking intensity of a shark circling a wounded seal. That had to be the lender. The man Jason owed $50,000 to by midnight. He wasn't drinking. He was waiting for his payout. Megan flitted through the crowd like a hummingbird in a sequined gown. She was live streaming, holding her phone high, narrating the tragedy of her life to her followers. "It is such a bittersweet night," I heard her say, pouting at the screen. "Celebrating the legacy, but saying goodbye to the man he used to be. Swipe up to donate to our care fund." Then the music cut out. A spotlight rented for the occasion swung across the room and landed on the grand staircase. Jason descended. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him perfectly, likely bought with the cash advance from my visa. He looked handsome. He looked successful. He looked like the golden boy I had tried so hard to raise. He walked to the center of the room, microphone in hand, and stood next to my wheelchair. He placed a hand on my shoulder. It felt heavy like a shackle. "Thank you all for coming," Jason said, his voice thick with practiced emotion. He paused, looking down at the floor, letting the silence build. This is the hardest night of my life." A murmur of sympathy rippled through the crowd. The loan shark in the back checked his watch. "You all know my father, Harold," Jason continued, gesturing to me. I let my head loll to the side, staring blankly at a floral arrangement. "He was a titan of industry, a genius. But time is the one enemy we can't defeat. Over the last few months, I have watched the light fade from his eyes. I have watched him forget my name. I have watched him forget himself." He squeezed my shoulder. I wanted to stand up and break his nose. Instead, I let a little bit of drool escape the corner of my mouth. I saw Megan zoom in with her camera. "It has been a struggle," Jason said, a single perfect tear rolling down his cheek. "Megan and I have sacrificed everything to care for him. We gave up our careers. We turned our home into a sanctuary for him. We have spent every penny we have to ensure his comfort." Lies. Every word was a lie. They had fed me cold pizza and locked me in a basement. "But we realized we can't do it alone anymore," Jason said, his voice breaking. "And Dad," in his last moment of clarity, he realized it too. He told me yesterday with tears in his eyes that he wanted to secure the future. He wanted to make sure his legacy was protected before the fog took him completely. He signaled to someone off stage. Paul the forger stepped forward, wearing a cheap suit and carrying a leather portfolio. He looked nervous. He knew the stakes. He placed a document on a small table in front of my wheelchair. The spotlight narrowed, focusing on the paper and my trembling hands. "Tonight isn't just a party," Jason declared, looking directly at the loan shark in the back. "It is a transfer of trust. My father is signing over full power of attorney and control of the Bennett estate to me, his only son, to ensure that his empire is managed with the same integrity he built it with." Applause broke out. Polite, confused applause from the influencers, a slow, menacing nod from the loan shark. "Dad," Jason whispered, leaning down, thrusting a gold pen into my hand. "It is time. Sign it, and you can go to sleep." I gripped the pen. My hand shook violently, not from age, but from the effort of holding back my rage. I looked at the paper. It was the deed to the house in Ohio. It was the access to the accounts. It was my life. I looked up at Jason. His eyes were wide, manic. "Do it," he hissed, his lips barely moving. "Sign it, or you rot in the cellar." I looked at the crowd. I saw the faces of the people recording me. I saw the greed in Megan's eyes. I saw the violence in the loan shark's stance. I took a deep breath. I stopped shaking. I sat up straight in the wheelchair. The fog in my eyes cleared, instantly replaced by the sharp, cold stare of a man who had stared down embezzlers and thieves for 40 years. "I need the microphone," I said. My voice wasn't weak. It wasn't slurred. It was a command. Jason froze. The smile faltered. "Dad, just sign." "The microphone, Jason," I said louder. I reached out and snatched it from his hand before he could react. I held the mic to my lips. The feedback squealed for a second, silencing the room completely. I looked into the lens of Megan's phone. I looked at the loan shark. I looked at my son. "Thank you for that introduction, Jason," I said, my voice booming through the speakers. "But there is a small correction to your speech. You didn't sacrifice everything to care for me. You spent the last 3 days trying to drug me into a coma so you could steal $2 million that doesn't exist." Jason lunged for the mic, but I kicked the brake off the wheelchair and spun out of his reach. "Gus!" I shouted into the microphone. "Roll the tape!" The room went deathly silent as the feedback from the microphone faded. Jason stood frozen, his hand still outstretched where the microphone used to be, his face a mask of confusion that was rapidly crumbling into panic. I didn't give him a chance to recover. With a sudden violent motion, I kicked the rusted wheelchair backward. It clattered loudly across the marble floor, spinning and crashing into a table of champagne flutes. Glass shattered. The sound was like a gunshot signaling the start of the execution. I stood up to my full height. I straightened my spine, shedding the hunch of the frail old man I had played for 3 days. I buttoned the moth-eaten cardigan with dignity, transforming the rags they had put me in into a uniform of war. I looked at the crowd of influencers, hangers-on, and criminals. Then I looked at my son. "You look surprised, Jason," I said, my voice booming through the speakers with the authority of a courtroom judge. "You told these people I couldn't walk. You told them I couldn't think. You told them I was a vegetable. Does this look like a vegetable to you?" Jason stammered, taking a step back. "Dad, what are you doing? Sit down. You are having an episode. Someone call a doctor." "There is no doctor." I cut him off, my voice sharp as a razor. "And there is no episode. But there is a show. You wanted a ceremony, Jason. You wanted a spectacle. You wanted everyone to witness the transfer of the Bennett legacy. Well, you are going to get it. But before I sign anything, we need to review the balance sheet." I raised my hand and pointed to the massive projection screen behind us, which had been displaying a slideshow of stock photos of happy families. Gus hit it. The screen flickered. The stock photos vanished. In their place, a stark, high-resolution image appeared. It was an email. The font was large enough for everyone in the back of the room to read. Subject: expedited guardianship. To Jason Bennett. From Dr. Aris Thorne. I turned to the crowd, narrating the evidence like I was presenting to a grand jury. "This is an email my son sent 3 days ago to a doctor he found on the dark web. Read the text. Payment received. Diagnosis of advanced dementia prepared. No patient examination necessary." A gasp went through the room. I saw phones being raised, higher live streams capturing every pixel. Megan, who had been frozen near the bar, dropped her glass. I didn't wait. "Next slide, Gus." The screen changed. It was a photo of the 2 blue pills sitting in the doctor's dirty palm. "Cyanide would have been quicker, Jason," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "But you didn't want me dead. You wanted me compliant. You tried to chemically lobotomize your own father with high-grade antipsychotics so you could drag a drooling body to the bank. You wanted a signature, not a father." Jason was shaking his head, his face pale. "That is a lie. That is Photoshop. He is crazy." "Is it?" I asked. "Let's look at the financials." The screen flashed again. This time it was a split screen. On the left, the credit card statement Jason had tried to hide in the floor safe. On the right, a series of photos taken from Megan's own Instagram feed. I walked toward the screen using the microphone like a pointer. Here we see a charge for $4,000 at Nobu on October 12th. And here on the right, we see Megan posting a photo of a sushi boat with the caption, "Hustle hard, eat well," using my credit card. I pointed to another line item. Here is a $12,000 charge for a luxury consultation. And here is Jason posting a photo of a rented Lamborghini with the caption, "Self-made." I turned back to the crowd. My son isn't self-made. He is stolen-made. He stole my identity before I even stepped off the plane. He maxed out $20,000 in credit cards in my name while I was eating cold pizza on the floor of an empty house because he couldn't afford a chair. Laughter rippled through the crowd. It was nervous, cruel laughter. The illusion was breaking. The golden couple was turning into rust before their eyes. "Stop it!" Megan screamed, rushing toward me. She looked deranged, her mascara running. "Cut the feed. Everyone stop recording." I didn't flinch. I turned the microphone toward her. "And this brings us to the character witness. Gus, play the audio." The speakers crackled, and then Megan's voice filled the room, amplified and crystal clear. It was the recording from the ventilation shaft. "I can't stand it anymore, Jason. I can smell him from here. It is that old person smell. It is ruining the brand." The room went silent. Megan stopped in her tracks, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. "I don't care if he is dead," the recording continued. "In fact, that would be easier. Dump him at the state facility. The one on Skid Row." The crowd recoiled. Even the most vapid influencers looked disgusted. To hear the perfect wife plotting to dump an old man on Skid Row was too much even for Hollywood. I looked at Megan. She was trembling. The brand she had tried so hard to protect was incinerated. "You wanted a basement studio, Megan," I said softly into the mic. "Well, now you have a global audience. Are you ready for your close-up?" Jason lunged at me. He had snapped. His eyes were wild, desperate. He was going to tackle me, but he didn't make it. The man with the scar on his eyebrow. The loan shark stepped out from the pillar. He moved with terrifying speed. He grabbed Jason by the back of his tuxedo collar and jerked him backward. Jason choked his feet, leaving the ground. The loan shark didn't look at me. He looked at the screen. Gus had changed the slide again. It was the spreadsheet. The one showing the $50,000 debt to the private equity fund due at midnight. "Is this real?" the loan shark asked, his voice low and gravelly. I nodded. "It is real. And so is the eviction notice." I pointed to the final image on the screen. It was the ripped notice from the front door blown up to 10 feet tall. "Final notice to vacate." "This house doesn't belong to him," I announced to the room. "He is a squatter. He hasn't paid rent in 6 months. The champagne you are drinking stolen. The valet outside unpaid. The $50,000 he promised you tonight." I reached into my jacket pocket. I pulled out the cashier's check, the one they had been drooling over for 3 days. Jason's eyes bulged as he hung from the loan shark's grip. He clawed at the air, reaching for the paper. The check, he wheezed. "Give it to me. It covers everything." I held the check up to the light. "It looks real, doesn't it?" I said. "It has the watermarks. It has the routing numbers. It is a masterpiece of forgery. But I didn't forge it to steal money. I forged it to catch a thief." I ripped the check in half. Then I ripped it again, and again. I threw the confetti of blue paper into the air. It rained down on Jason's head like a ticker tape parade for a failed man. "There is no money, Jason," I said, my voice cold and final. "I sold the house in Ohio, yes, but I didn't bring the cash to Los Angeles. I put every single cent into an irrevocable trust for the Veterans Legal Defense Fund. You can't touch it. I can't touch it. It is gone." The loan shark dropped Jason. He hit the floor hard. The shark looked at me, then at Jason. "You told me he was signing over the estate," the shark said to Jason. "You told me you had the liquidity." "I do." Jason screamed, scrambling backward on the floor like a crab. "He is lying. He is senile. He doesn't know what he is saying." I stepped closer to my son. I loomed over him. "I am Harold Bennett," I thundered. "I spent 40 years hunting men who thought they could hide their sins in a spreadsheet. I tracked embezzlement schemes that would make your little operation look like a lemonade stand. You didn't invite a senile old man into your home, Jason. You invited a forensic auditor, and I just finished my audit. I turned to the back of the room. The double doors swung open. But it wasn't the caterers. Walking in with the stride of a conquering general was Ms. Evelyn Carter. She was wearing a trench coat and holding a leather briefcase. Flanking her were 4 men in windbreakers emblazoned with 3 yellow letters, FBI. The room erupted into chaos. Guests screamed and dropped their drinks, scrambling for the exits. But the exits were blocked by uniformed officers. I looked down at my son. He was weeping now, curled into a ball at the feet of the man who wanted to break his legs. "The audit is closed, son," I said, dropping the microphone. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. "And you failed." The room was cleared with a speed that spoke of professional efficiency. The FBI agents didn't shout. They didn't need to. Their authority was a physical weight in the room, pressing down on the frivolity of the party until it suffocated. I watched from my wheelchair, which I had reclaimed not out of frailty, but out of exhaustion. My legs felt heavy, not with age, but with the burden of what I had just done. Ms. Carter stood beside me, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder. It was a grounding touch, a reminder that I was not just a father betraying his son, but a victim seeking justice. "You did good, Harold," she murmured. "It's over." But it wasn't over for them. The agents were marching Jason and Megan toward the massive front doors. Megan was no longer screaming. She had gone limp, her face a mask of smudged mascara and shock, realizing that her follower count wouldn't bail her out of federal custody. She looked at Jason with pure hatred, a look that promised a future of testifying against him to save herself. Jason, however, wasn't looking at Megan. He was looking back at me. He dug his heels into the expensive rug, fighting the agents just enough to turn his body. "Dad!" he screamed. It was a raw, guttural sound that echoed off the high ceilings. "Dad, look at me. I'm your boy. You can't let them take me to federal prison. I'll die in there." The agents paused, adjusting their grip. They looked at me, waiting to see if the old man would crack. It was the moment every con artist counts on the victim's guilt. The parent's instinct to protect even when the child is holding the knife. I stood up from the wheelchair. I walked toward him slowly. The room went silent again. The remaining guests, the caterers, the police, everyone watched. I stopped 3 feet from him. I looked into his eyes. I searched for the toddler I had held, the teenager I had taught to drive. But all I saw was the man who had mixed sedatives into my juice. I saw the man who had laughed about dumping me on Skid Row. "You aren't my boy," I said, my voice quiet, but carrying to every corner of the room. "My boy died a long time ago. You are just a man who tried to murder me for a payout." "I didn't," Jason sobbed, dropping to his knees, dragging the agents down with him. "I just wanted the money. I wasn't going to hurt you. I just needed you to sleep." "You wanted me to sleep forever," I corrected him. "And you wanted the money so badly, you destroyed everything to get it." "Well, here is the truth about the money, Jason." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't a check. It was a receipt. A donation receipt. "The house in Ohio sold for $2 million, I said. Jason's head snapped up, greed flickering even through his terror. "But I didn't bring it here. I didn't put it in a trust for you. I didn't keep it for myself." I held the receipt in front of his face. "I donated every single cent to the Veterans Legal Defense Fund last month," I said. "The day I found out you forged my signature on that car lease was the day I emptied the estate. I knew you were coming for me. I knew you would never stop until you had it all. So I made sure there was nothing to take." Jason stared at the paper. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The elaborate plan, the fake doctor, the party, the drugs, it was all for nothing. He had committed a dozen felonies for a bank account that had been empty for weeks. "Zero," I said. "You did all this for $0. You gave it away." he whispered, his voice cracking. To strangers. To people who have honor, I said. To people who don't poison their fathers. Jason slumped. The fight went out of him. He looked small. He looked like a child who had broken a toy he couldn't fix. Get him out of here, I said to the agents. I'm done. They hauled him up. As they dragged him through the door, he didn't scream anymore. He just wept, a low, broken sound of total defeat. I watched the heavy doors slam shut, sealing the silence inside. I turned to Gus, who was standing by the projector, a grim smile on his face. Nice show, Gus said. It was a tragedy, I replied, but at least the ending was right. I looked around the empty, ruined mansion. It wasn't a home. It was a crime scene. And I was the only witness left standing. I picked up my suitcase. I was ready to go. The red and blue lights of the police cruisers faded into the distance, taking the noise and the chaos with them. I stood on the driveway watching the car, carrying my son, turn the corner and disappear. I waited for the grief to hit me. I waited for the crushing weight of failure that parents are supposed to feel when they lose a child. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt a sudden sharp intake of breath, as if I had been holding it for 3 days. The air was cool and clean. The silence wasn't oppressive anymore. It was the silence of a ledger that had finally been balanced. I turned to Gus. He was standing by the hedge, leaning on his garden hose, watching me with a stoic expression. He didn't offer pity. He knew better. I walked over to him and extended my hand. Thank you, brother, I said. My voice was steady. You didn't have to get involved. You could have let them take me. Gus gripped my hand. His shake was firm, the grip of a man who had seen his share of battles. I don't like bullies, Harold. And I really hate bad neighbors. You handled yourself well in there. I reached into my pocket and pulled out an envelope. It wasn't much, just a personal check from my emergency travel fund. It was enough to fix his roof and buy a lifetime supply of good scotch. For the consulting fees, I said, pressing it into his palm. Don't argue. Consider it a hazard pay bonus. Gus looked at the envelope, then at me. He nodded once, a sharp dip of his chin. Safe travels, auditor. I walked back to the mansion one last time. The sheriff's deputies were already stringing yellow tape across the massive front doors. Crime scene. Do not enter. The house looked different now. It wasn't a fortress. It wasn't a palace. It was just a building. A hollow stucco box that had held nothing but lies. I grabbed the handle of my suitcase, which was waiting on the curb. A taxi pulled up, its headlights cutting through the pre-dawn mist. The driver popped the trunk. I lifted my bag inside. It felt lighter than it had when I arrived. The weight of expectation was gone. The burden of a legacy that no one wanted was gone. Where to, the driver asked as I settled into the back seat. LAX, I said. International Terminal. He pulled away from the curb. I didn't look back at the house. I looked forward through the windshield at the city lights sprawling out before me. I took out my phone and opened the airline app. I had a ticket to book. Not back to Ohio, not back to the cold and the memories of a life I had outgrown. I typed in a destination I had promised my late wife we would visit 40 years ago. Hawaii. One way. I was 71 years old. I was alone. I had just sent my only son to prison. By all accounts, I should have been broken. But as the taxi merged onto the freeway, speeding toward the ocean, I realized I wasn't broken. I was free. The audit was over. The books were closed. And for the first time in my life, the only person I had to answer to was myself. I learned the hard way that DNA doesn't define family. Integrity does. For years, I thought being a good father meant endless sacrifice, even when it hurt. But blind devotion isn't love, it's enablement. My son saw my kindness as weakness and my silence as stupidity. He forgot that the same hands that built a safety net could also tear it down. Standing up for myself wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my dignity. If you are holding on to toxic people just because they share your last name, let go. Your peace is worth more than their inheritance. If you enjoyed this story of justice, please hit the like button and subscribe for more. Have you ever had to cut off a family member to save yourself? Tell me your story in the comments below.